Good evening and welcome to another edition of Alberta Landlord Shoptalk, all things around landlording. I'm your host, Mackenzie Wilson. Tonight, Chris is continuing his summer vacation, and so we got a cool little bit of show set for you guys tonight. I've got Andrea Warkentin, our preferred partner in Central Alberta. Among her plethora of experience, she's not got a real estate license as a realtor, but she manages over 200 properties in Central Alberta and has been investing in real estate through a number of strategies, including creative real estate strategies since 2003. Also joining us here tonight would be Barry McGuire. Barry McGuire has been practicing real estate law since for over 45 years, or currently at that mark, longer than I've been alive, and is very knowledgeable. And he has a focus on creative real estate, so agreements for sales, rent to owns, and other creative strategies. So the conversation will be pretty fun tonight. I've got some really good experience at the table on this panel. We're going to talk about going from small family, single family units to small multifamily with tenants in place when you're doing a buying or a selling. And we'll talk about the nuances you need to be aware of and just cover some good due diligence when you're looking at grabbing these properties with tenants in place and what you should be asking for in your paperwork all along the way. So, and really we'll take this conversation wherever you guys want as well. So tune in and say hi, and it'll be a great show. So without further ado, let's get my two esteemed guests online with me. Here's Andrea and Barry McGuire. Good evening.
Hey, good evening.
And how are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Sorry, I'm still eating my supper, but
all good. So you know what? We were just talking off air before we got live here, and it's nice to be able to go to the restaurants these days with people other than your household. I don't mind my household, but I like to see other people as well. So it's kind of nice to have that flexibility and freedom. So for the folks that don't know you, that have tuned in or new, let's do a quick introduction. And Andrea, I'll start with you.
Okay. So my name's Andrea Warkentin. I'm in Red Deer, and I'm a realtor and licensed property manager. So we go all over Central Alberta, and I've been a real estate investor since 2003. And I do lots of different things with real estate. I do long-term buy and holds, fix and flips, rent to owns, seller financing deals, single family, multifamily, condo, and now doing development projects as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrea. That's awesome. And Barry McGuire, for the folks that don't know who you are, what do you do?
I'm, well, as you said, Mackenzie, I've been a lawyer for longer than you've been alive, and I don't know that that's a badge of honor because, but anyway.
Well, you must be doing something right if you're still doing it. So I think you're doing okay there.
You know, the funny part about lawyers is they say that we practice law. So after 45 years, I'm still practicing. So I don't know, sooner or later I'll get it right, I guess, and I won't have to practice anymore.
Like a fine wine, you get better with age.
Yeah, so I do a lot of creative real estate work. I have a big real estate practice. I've got a team of about 8 people at Field Law, where I practice here in Edmonton. Field Law is located in Edmonton, Calgary, and Yellowknife, so we cover the province and the territories. Lots of support there, different than when I was on my own with Lyndon Thiessen and Richard Bell for all those years. Now, if somebody has a tax question or an intellectual property question or a complicated corporation or they want to do some securities work, I just march down the hall to the appropriate person. And it's great to have those resources so I can concentrate on real estate, both, basic moms and pops and the kids and the dog moving into the house, as well as the investor side of it. So I continue to do that, teaching younger people how to do it. I've had a few people say to me, so Barry, who's your replacement? You can't do this forever. And so we're looking for, to train people and mentor and do that kind of thing. I'm really enjoying it. So that's me at this point in my life.
Absolutely. Very cool. Thank you, Barry. Folks, if when you're tuning in, just a quick hi, let us know where you're watching from. And this is definitely an open discussion. So as we dive into the conversation topics, ask questions, get clarification on points, as our goal is to provide the best value to you guys and the community. So without that, well, on that point, let's pivot into some of the conversation. So when I was talking to Andrea earlier about what we wanted to do for the show today, we had a really good conversation around buying and selling, particularly with multifamily, because in that setting, you're going to always be probably hopefully accepting a building with tenants in place to maintain that cash flow. And what do you look for when you have tenants in place? Maybe you're even doing a small single family, a suite at home, and there's tenants in place. Do you accept them? Do you buy them without tenants? Let's talk about the differences right off the bat. And Angela, I'll throw it at you. Pros and cons of buying with tenants and without tenants.
Well, the pro is the bank likes to see that there's income coming in, and that's how they qualify you. So oftentimes the bank wants to see a full tenancy, whether it's a single family house or even a fourplex. Of course, it depends on each person's situation in terms of getting mortgage qualifying, but oftentimes they do want to see the building tenanted. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we like to do is if we know that we're going to be purchasing a building, we like to go in there and have a look and see how people live, and if possible, meet the tenants. Why this is important is you do have one shot to get rid of somebody. And that is, when I say get rid of somebody, I'm going to maybe quantify that. So if you take over a property and you're going to do a significant amount of renovation, you can do a 3-month notice to renovate when you're initially purchasing the property. If you're not initially purchasing the property and you already own it, you have to give 365 days notice, which isn't all that convenient. But let me give you an example. Let's say you have a hoarder living in one of your units. You probably do not want to take on that responsibility of that person. And so you can use that 3-month notice in order to renovate to get rid of these people. So basically what the act says is you have to be like replacing kitchens and bathrooms, things that would make it so the person couldn't actually live there while they're there. So that's something that we tend to use if we feel like this person is not somebody that we want to deal with and we have a legitimate way to renovate. Obviously, it's not going to work if it's a 2-year-old house. But if it's, a 50-year-old fourplex or single family house, then you can justify that.
Absolutely. And probably one thing we'll tie in for clarification, when you talk about doing this 3-month exercise to remove to evict for doing a substantial renovation, are you talking about month to month or are you talking about fixed term leases?
So this would be in a month to month scenario. With a fixed term lease, you do have to honor the lease. Another thing that's important to notice is when you are, speaking of leases, when you are reviewing the leases of the existing tenants, you want to see what kind of terms they are on, whether they are on a fixed term lease or month to month, whether they've just signed a lease or they're coming up for renewal. Because if you have the opportunity to give a rental increase, once you remove conditions for that 90-day increase, that would probably be a good thing if there's room to do so.
Yep, absolutely. Barry, I'll throw it to you from I guess from a legal perspective. When people are assuming tenants and you see the offers come in, is there anything that we need to be concerned of? I mean, obviously we know the RTA side of it, but anything from a contract side and the purchasing agreement that we can watch out for that would dictate one thing or the other with the situation? I guess how am I trying to ask you? I'm trying to say, with tenants in place and you see the paperwork come in, is there anything that's ever caught your eye when you look at the purchase agreements, I guess, with tenants in place?
There isn't, Mackenzie, there's not very much in the purchase agreements that show up. And often that's all I see is the purchase agreement. All of the lease examining and that sort of thing, the inspections are all done as part of the diligence side. And I don't see deals until they are unconditional. So all of that is done without me looking at it. But I certainly agree with Andrea that you have to know the way the Residential Tenancies Act, the RTA, you have to know the way it works so that you can give some notice to your advantage, so that you know how to negotiate with the seller, so that you perhaps in your offer make sure it's clear that if any tenant leaves in the 4 months till you close, that it's you who gets to put the new tenant in, along with your property manager and under your rules in your lease, and so then you don't have to worry about taking over a tenant. Sometimes sellers resist that, but it's a term that you can negotiate. Mm-hmm. Something else that that I'm pretty sure everybody in this community knows, but I'm just going to say it anyway, is that when you're examining the leases as part of the diligence side of things, you certainly want to do the things Andrea said. I think you also want to look and see whether or not there are any incentives in the lease. In tough times, sometimes we as landlords give incentives, and if one of the incentives is the last 2 months of the lease are free, then you take over with 4 months left, and guess what? You're missing revenue. So that's something to look for. And then there's the issue of the in-out reports, the inspection reports.
Yes.
There's supposed to be an inspection report done when people move in, and if it isn't done, and if the rules around inspection reports aren't followed, then when you as the new landlord take over the place, if there isn't an inspection report, as you probably know, you can't make a claim against the security deposit. Or if the rules around the inspection reports haven't been properly followed, the tenant can resist, and if they win, you can't claim anything against the inspection report. So those are some things you can do. And I think the other thing that's it's a bit farther along the line. Sometimes you can't get really good information from a landlord. I mean, every once in a while, I think we've all seen it, we run into a landlord who never has a signed lease. They just have an envelope that they keep the records on, and it's all verbal. And so you don't quite know what you're getting into. And so for that kind of a lease, we could consider putting in the offer that the seller will provide what they call estoppel certificates, tenant estoppel certificates, or tenant rent declarations. It's just a one-pager that says, hi, I'm the tenant in 201. My rent is this. My security deposit is this. I don't have any side deals with my landlord, and everything's up to date. And so that is kind of a confirmation for you when there isn't a written lease that here are the facts about a particular tenant. A landlord who doesn't have any records could very possibly say, tenant estoppel certificates, I'm not giving you no GD tenant estoppel certificates. Yeah. Sometimes they say, well, I don't want to do it, but you can do it. And then you can bang on the tenant's doors and get to meet them and see if you can get the information. So those are things you can do. I don't see that very much, but I think it's good for people to know about those possibilities and situations.
Yeah, those are great points. Now, you unloaded, I think, 3 or 4 things I want to comment on. So I'm going to try to go back my Rolodex of memory here and see if I can tag everything that Barry said and just highlight some good points. So for the number one, in this whole due diligence process, the due diligence is done by you, the buyer. It's your responsibility to manage that tenancies. If you're going to accept new tenants, you have to figure out that process and do that paperwork. Barry's job is to make sure the transaction goes through smoothly and there's no issues with, say, a real property report and a few other nuances. There's no liens or other beneficial interest on the property title. That's his legal realm. So he's made a good very point. I don't see anything with the tenants. That's kind of out of his area. So don't be expecting the lawyer to follow through. And if they do, it will probably cost you more than what it's worth. And the second good point you brought up there, Barry, I'm trying to remember now. But
I thought the tenant estoppel certificates, I've never heard of that, Barry. So I think that's fantastic, because we have a client right now who's buying some properties, and these people have been there since 2006. We don't even know if they paid a damage deposit. We don't even know what appliances are theirs, because the current owner decided to say his way of saying it was, if there's a laundry set there, you can use it. If not, you have to purchase your own. So how would I have any idea, because it's not listed in any of the lease agreements, whether the laundry belongs to them or not?
Well, you know what, Andrea? I will send you one of these one-page forms. Mackenzie, I'll send one to you too, and then you can adapt it. The one I have, Andrea, doesn't deal with the appliances, but it's pretty easy to add. A one-liner where the tenant would say. So I'll ship that to you tomorrow. And Mackenzie.
And I think it made me think of another thing that oftentimes we see tenants take with them, which can be drapes, because as we're transitioning everyone over from the cheap plastic blinds to drapes because they last longer, if people put their own custom drapes up, how would I know unless it's been marked on the report? And it's just one, it might be a small thing, but it's just one more item that adds a cost to the owner to replace.
Yeah. That's another thing. And anything else you can think of that for information you'd like to know, but you're not getting from your landlord, but the tenant might be able to tell you. So
and what I like about that whole form you discussed, though, is you're not just trusting one source of information. You're going beyond and you're validating what you think you know from you've been told on your due diligence side while you're doing this from the landlord. You're going to each of the tenants and confirming the facts, because it's, with the best of intention, they may try to provide all the information, or they may not, simply can't remember, and you may not be getting the full picture of what's going on in that rental property. So not only, it's good practice not just to go from to the seller and get what you can from them, but also talk to each of those tenants. And especially if it's in say a multifamily or small multifamily, like a fourplex or an eightplex, you want to be talking to everybody as well. And I think maybe Andrea, you mentioned this once before, but when you're going in and doing the viewings and looking at the property for conditions, do you just check one or two units and do a sample, or do you check them all?
I try to check them all as much as possible. So last time I was doing a bunch of multi-visits in one day, there was a few COVID people, but I caught them on the second time I went back. And that's sometimes a benefit of having to do your due diligence over a number of appointments. So, being there with the appraiser and being, the appraiser needs to get into every unit. Same with the home inspector. But because we missed some and not others, between the two, we were able to get into every unit, which was fantastic because they were on different days. So, but it's not uncommon, I would say, that especially when you get to the fourplexes and above, it's certainly apartment buildings, if you're dealing with 12 units or more, that oftentimes sellers will only want to show you a vacant unit or what they call a show suite, or maybe the caretaker's suite. And then they may verbally tell you that the rest of the units look the same. And you really need to get into every single unit. It's super important to do that due diligence.
They may have renovated one or two and they show you those two, and then you believe that's the standard, and you move in, or you get the fourplex or sixplex, and you realize the last four units are from 1970s and their original finishings, and all of a sudden your pro forma, when you're thinking about the money you need to put in to get this to market rent, your budget's out the door, because all of a sudden you've got unforeseen costs that you didn't see coming into it. So
and one other thing I would mention too, quite often when you get sometimes to the fourplex and above, oftentimes sellers will want either a signed offer before they'll even allow you into a unit, or a signed letter of intent that says, we're a serious buyer. We would like to come in and have a look at the units. But sometimes you have to write that offer first as a realtor, and then you're able to get your client into all of the units. And that's when you do your due diligence. So oftentimes, when you're dealing with the fourplex and above, people will give you their pro forma, and you have to be careful again. So you need to see copies of property tax statements, of water bills, of anything that's included. And it's really nice if they can also provide the last 2 to 3 years of any capital cost expenditures. So hot water tanks, furnaces, boilers, roofs, anything major that they've done is super helpful.
Actually, you made me think of something too, Andrea. I know when I did my couple of my last purchases, I went through and I asked for receipts for warranty purposes. So same thing, furnace, hot water tank. If they did an IKEA cabinets, they have a pretty good warranty as well. So if you have any of that kind of stuff, then you're able to execute on that warranty, or at least try, depending if it's not owner transferable or not. So. Well, let's segue down to more due diligence around the paperwork. I know we're talking off air. You mentioned you had a situation where a buyer was coming to buy multiple units, and you guys made a request from the seller for paperwork, and what you got back wasn't the best. So let's talk about what we should get, and then talk about what you probably won't get, or I know we'll fill in the gaps, right? So if we've got tenants in place, what are the different types of pieces of paperwork we should be expecting?
Well, ideally, normally what they want to provide is just the lease agreement. And then hopefully when you take possession of the property, you also get to see that move-in report. But ideally, you do want their initial application, especially if they've been a long-term tenant. Things do change over time, but usually people's emergency contacts don't change too much over time. Photo ID for the tenant if they have it. And, any notices that have been served, especially if they're in regards to non-payment of rent or some sort of eviction matter. We want to know what the full history is. And so to give you an example, I have a client taking over a building that's full of people that I would not rent to. Is the kindest way to say that. And so in order to clean up the building, once he removed conditions, we were able to serve the notices. But as luck would have it, those people have not paid their rent this month because they know there's a transition and they're trying to get away with not paying rent and thinking that, it'll get lost in the shuffle, I guess. But if we're going to take those people to court, I need to know who they actually are. How can I file and enforce a court document if I don't have photo ID and know who these people actually are? And I think that's like the biggest thing, because I'm getting pushback from two tenants. I had one tenant that we gave her notice that we are not renewing her fixed term lease. And she phoned the kind people at Service Alberta who answer your questions. And there is nowhere there does it say, and month to month thereafter, nowhere on there. It just says fixed term lease. This is the date. So we gave the proper notice. Well, you don't even have to give notice, but when people don't understand, they just call the 1-800 number. So we've booked court regardless because we don't think she's going to leave. And so again, how can we enforce a court order when we don't know for sure 100% who this person is? And so unless your current owner has physically checked ID or can confirm that this person is the person that's written on the lease, it just makes it a little more difficult. And then in the same building, we had another person claim that they didn't have to pay any rent because there was mold. So we had somebody go over today, and I did let her know that they're not allowed to withhold rent. If there's an issue, then they have to go through the proper paperwork process, just like we do. So when we called to, confirm that we were on our way, the excuse was, "Oh, I'm hopping in the shower. I can't see you." Well, sorry, we're coming, And so people try to use these excuses, and there's no mold, but of course she's trying to delay however she can. So you end up with these really long text messages all about a story as to why she shouldn't be paying rent. And then her friends broke the window in her bedroom, and she said she was going to replace it. But she said that when the window person came, they told her it wasn't to code. And I said, well, that's funny because the city of Red Deer says that it is. And here's the secondary suite. So it's the games that people play, right? And so you have to be very firm sometimes with people, because if you give just a little bit, they're going to take it as far as they can. And so it's important to get as much information as you can. And so and continue on with that process. And sometimes you have to be very blunt, and you don't pay, you don't stay. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and what I want to add on to, and I think this through, like you said, I think the key point is get all of your information up front before you go unconditional, because that's when you've got the leverage to make that landlord comply. And again, this is again more in reference to investor type properties where we already have tenants in place. I was going to go with this. Oh yeah. The other things I've gone after too is a history of utility bills, so I understand what those costs are associated with it, and actually I wanted a payment history of the tenants. Have they been paying rent on time? So in this day and age, e-transfer seems to be a popular choice. So I was able to get a history of the last 12 months of e-transfers. So I actually not only did I see that they paid the rent, but I saw when they paid the rent, ensuring that the tenants were easy to work with and paying rent on time. Yeah.
Andrea, what do you do about tenant insurance when you're taking over existing?
Ooh, good point.
Well, as we switch over lease agreements, we do have the New Era insurance. So we encourage people that if they don't already have tenant insurance, to go through the New Era insurance. And I think it's important to take 5 minutes to explain to people why they need insurance. And, it's for their benefit should something go wrong.
So give us the 2-minute summary. So I'm the tenant and go, Andrea, I have nothing. Why would I spend money on insurance? You can tell, look at me. So why do I need insurance?
Well, most of the time I'm having these conversations with people in multifamily as opposed to single family. Yeah. So my multifamily pitch is, well, you have 3 other neighbors around you. If somebody has a fire while, on cooking food on their stovetop and the building burns down, it might not have been your fault, but you're going to end up at a hotel. And so insurance is going to pay for that. Same thing as if the sewer backs up or the hot water tank goes and you have your mattress on the floor and you're soaked your mattress and it's done. So it's for your protection.
Yeah, that's good. And that was about 2 minutes. That's excellent. Easy.
Do you Barry, do you see, I'm just trying to think, and this might be more market dependent, but do you see interesting clauses or terms that sellers have put in that they've around certain things with tenants in place that maybe you could recall that anything really interesting you've seen come across your desk?
Well, we see various kinds of clauses. Sometimes I see the tenant estoppel clause. Sometimes I see specifically that the buyers want the inspection report, the in-out report. What's the proper name for it, Andrea? What's the proper name for that report?
Move-in inspection.
Just move-in inspection. Yeah.
Report. I often see the one that a buyer says that once they have the right to put in new tenants. If any tenant leaves before they take possession, they have the right to vet and put in the new tenant. Sellers resist that sometimes because they maybe think that you're not a good judge of new tenant talent, and if you don't close, they'll be stuck with your tenant. But it depends where the negotiating leverage is.
Yes.
Sometimes when a buyer has some leverage and there's a certain number of tenants, when you're doing your diligence, they try and get a seller to guarantee that there will be this number of tenants there, or that the rent that the seller is collecting will be guaranteed. Sellers resist that, of course, but it depends again where the negotiating leverage is. So I see, kinds of clauses like that. Yep. Right now, I don't see too much because right now and for the last extensive time period, it seems to have been a seller's market on the multifamily side of things, and there's not as much room for buyers to call the tune. So
you kind of take what you get at that point.
It's like that. I see fairly clean offers.
Yeah. Okay. One thing you got me thinking of too, we haven't really talked much about is the damage deposit. So I'm trying to think how we did it. I think it was pretty much written into our offer that we wanted, hey, this is the this is the current rents, we expect to see as part of the statement of accounts, the damage deposits transferred over.
Yes. I mean, the rules are that if you are a buyer taking over an existing tenant, that the seller has to transfer the security deposit to you as new buyer. What you don't want them to do is be giving it back to the tenant. So what usually happens is so firstly, as part of your diligence, you want to know, just as you want to know what the rent is, you want to know what the security deposit is. And that probably is in a lease that's properly drawn. That information will be in there, or you get it from your tenant estoppel certificate. So the way that it transfers is the buyer typically gets a credit on the statement of adjustments. So if the security deposits in total are $4,200 for however many tenants there are, then the buyer gets a credit on the statement of adjustments, which is a reduction in the purchase price. The reduction in the purchase price means that the buyer now writes a check for $4,200 and puts it in the account where they keep their security deposits. But the most common way for it all to be adjusted between parties is a credit from the seller to the buyer on the statement of adjustments.
Awesome. Okay. So
I have one tip here while we're talking about documentation.
Let's get into it.
Yeah. So we had a tenant pass away a couple weeks ago, which brought us about to being a little more proactive on this. And she died of natural causes. There was nothing untoward. But when she passed away, she had part-time custody of her son, and nobody knew where her son was. And so there was a bit of a panic there. So it's very important to make sure that you have emergency contact information for all of your tenants, and that you try to keep track of either a date of birth or a roundabout age for children. Because at first, when the RCMP went in, because we didn't know she'd passed away, somebody basically said, we haven't heard from this lady for a while. Can somebody do a wellness check? So the RCMP went in, and because this lady was not very old, she was under 40 years old. At first, they were not sure if there was something untoward. And so they were in a bit of a panic to find out the age of this child that we knew to be living there, who was 10 years old. So they wanted to just rule out that there was some former spouse type violent situation. So when we're talking about photo ID for people, sometimes you'll come across people that are like, oh, I've never had photo ID. Then you need to get some sort of either birth certificate or healthcare card, something that has a date of birth on it. And one of the things that I now use with tenants as to why it's important for us to have their photo ID, because oftentimes tenants have never given photo ID before, especially if they've lived in the same place for a long time. So as we're updating our records and also, preparing to put new people onto the Landlord Credit Bureau, of course, we want to be sure who they are, going back to the court process. And so now what I do is I use that story of this lady passing away and why we need to have photo ID. Another quick story is we had somebody fire a gun from one suite into another accidentally. And so again, we needed to know, because the RCMP were on their way, who lived there. So I can provide you with a name that was on a lease, but because when I took over managing that building, we had no photo ID for that person. We just inherited them. I wasn't super helpful to the RCMP to be able to tell them, any more details about this. So, when you're taking on new tenants who were existing to the building, take it from an emergency response point of view as to why you need photo ID, because there's been a lot of identity thefts. People are very hesitant to provide that information, but it is part of our normal intake for new tenants coming in. It's just getting some of that information from existing tenants.
Yeah, that can be certainly challenging for sure. Yeah, those are good points. I mean, I try to think when I had a problem too, and I took on the one tenant. She had been there 5 or 6 years with the previous owner, and I had gotten them to sign up on a landlord credit bureau. At that time, it's called TVS, tenant verification services. But you're right, you got to put in like a birth date or a SIN number, some pieces of information to confirm the identity of that person. And at that time, I couldn't do it. So, I ended up actually leaving the TVS check out of it, or that addition. I eventually ended up not renewing on her lease, but yeah, and it was the same thing. Like, I had no idea. If something happened, I'd be like, I believe it's this person. I know her face looks like, but her name, she told me she's Jane Smith. So, yeah, but yeah, it really puts you at a disadvantage. And then on top of it, if there's damages and you go down the whole filing for damages and all that, how do you serve someone if you don't know who they are?
Mm-hmm.
So that's Andrea, updated emergency contact information plus ID as part of taking over.
Yes, and knowing how old the children are in the unit,
right?
And to know if there's any pets as well. So,
okay.
So, I know people push back on age as a man, I'm bad for things tonight. I'm just stalling all over here. But information you can't ask for, confidential information that's against the Privacy Act. Age is definitely one of them, also if they're over the age of 18. But are we okay in the realm of saying, hey, if there's any children under the age of 18, I need to know their age?
Yeah, I usually just write down their age. I just say, how old's your child? Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Simple as that. Well, let's switch some gears here. So part of the kind of excitement we got Barry on tonight, and I know Andrea, you're part of this expert panel. They have an event coming up here in July. Is this creative real estate side? So I wanted to. We have this conversation that happens every once in a while on the page, and I know Barry, you're such a great resource for this, and you focus on not. I mean, obviously, you definitely do the regular mom and pop purchases with a mortgage, but there's more than one way to purchase a property. Maybe you can kind of give me a highlight of some creative strategies that more of these advanced investors are using these days that can buy properties with little or no money down.
All right. Well, sure. We can talk about that, Mackenzie. As you know, because you've attended, Don and I produce what we call focus workshops, which we've been doing, how long, Donna? 15 years now? Around 15 years. And those focus workshops are all about creative real estate. And so we have the seller financing style of thing, like the agreement for sale. That's a seller financing strategy. We talk about rent to own. We talk about fix and flip. We talk about wholesaling, or assignments, as people call it sometimes. And we talk about joint ventures as the joint venture strategy relates to all those other strategies, because you can often string a couple of strategies together, buy a property by way of agreement for sale, exit through a rent to own, and tack a joint venture on at appropriate places in the process. So and we wrap all of those up in a program we do about once every 18 months called the Rapid Cash Program. So that's a 2-day event where we do the deep dive into the 5 strategies. Andrea is a lead instructor, a focus team leader at those events. She's been doing it with us for a long time. She's really good at it. There's nobody better than Andrea at sitting around the kitchen table explaining to a seller why they should do all the financing for Andrea on a particular property. It's actually worth the price of admission to listen to Andrea and learn how she does it, which is so really, when you think about it, easy peasy. Sellers listen to her, and Andrea does deals by the bucket load because she knows how the strategies work and she knows how to talk to people. So, Andrea, I don't want to pump your tires too much, but all that's true. So it's all true. So here's a question. Why do people rent to own and not a regular bank? That is a question that everybody wants to know. Why, if people want to buy a property, do they not just go and buy a property? Well, Andrea, why do people sometimes have to do rent to own?
Well, there's several different scenarios. One of the main ones is when people are in the middle of a divorce, but the divorce has not been finalized. They generally need to sell a marital home and they don't want to be renting. These are people that normally have owned for a long time, can't imagine themselves renting again and then having to move to something else. And so they can't take title until their divorce is done. So it might not be anything to do with money or credit. It's timing. It comes down to timing. Another good example is for people who have been through credit challenges and are working to rebuild their credit. They may have a down payment, but no ability to get a mortgage. And so in that case, they like to choose a house because they're a little bit concerned that maybe prices go outside of their reach. So if you've been paying attention, depending on your geographical area, so for example, Red Deer, year over year, prices have gone up 5% on the single family house market. So if they continue up that way, but people can lock in their price today, they're hoping that when 2 years from now they purchase the property, it's worth more than what they're purchasing it for.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are two very, very common reasons. Some other ones, Mackenzie, are new Canadians, people who have started a new business, people who have started a new job, often do not get the same credit treatment from a bank that folks who are not new Canadians, new business, or have a new job. They don't. Their business income or their job income doesn't get counted till they've been at it for a while, and the bank sees a bit of a track record. I had one AFS client who was selling an existing home, and that sale didn't go the way they wanted it to go, but they had to move, and the only way they could buy a home was if they got seller financing from somebody else. And so that was a really short-term deal. They only did it for 6 months. As soon as their home sold and everything got freed up, then they were able to get a new mortgage and pay out. So there are actually a lot of reasons to answer the question why people do a rent to own. And the big part of the thing that's driving them is they want to be a homeowner. And the reasons why they want to be a homeowner and why they can't be a homeowner vary a lot. But what drives them is, oh, darn it, we want to own our own place.
Yep. Absolutely. Cool. I'm going to do a segue back. We got some questions I realized I missed in the chat going back to our previous topic, and then
Sure.
we'll jump back to where we're going here. So let me just figure this one part out. So Lewis brought up a good point here too. Going back to the driver's license, here it is. Is it legal to keep a copy of the driver's license? I was told by Alberta Landlord Tenant Board it is not. So that's interesting. I'll share my personal experience, and maybe I'm not doing this correctly, but I do keep copies of that because I don't have a very good memory, and I need to have that stuff written down. I know that if you have private information, you're supposed to keep it under lock and key. So there's a certain standard you need to store that information by, so it's considered safe, which I would hazard to guess most of us probably do not follow because it's probably sitting on a Google Drive somewhere. But Andrea, what's your take on this?
I do the same as you. So we keep it in a file, and yes, you are supposed to have your files locked up, but we don't distribute that information to anyone. It's just for our records. And once the tenant moves out, technically we have to keep those records for 3 years before we can destroy them. So.
Oh, interesting.
And, you know, I don't know what the privacy laws say about keeping a copy of the driver's license. I know in my legal business, lenders say, Barry, you're our lawyer. You have to get, and then they give me a whole list of ID requirements. And all banks are different. That's one of the huge things that gives me heartburn is the ID side of things. But I have to, if people are going to get their mortgage money, I have to take usually 2 copies of ID and keep it on the file and have it available to the bank. So for all I know, I might be offside privacy laws, but nobody objects because if they don't give me the ID, they don't get to buy. So practically speaking, it's not a factor on my end.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing to add here too, and this is a good point, Mindy brings this up. If they don't have a driver's license, you can still get their identification picture card, which looks really similar. So basically, it's a card that looks exactly the same as a driver's license, but it's not a driver's license. It's just a basic Alberta
ID card.
government issued, ID card. Exactly. So those are as well.
If somebody gets their hair up and says, I've called the board, they say you can't take my driver's license. You can say, okay, well, fine. Let's look at the driver's license. I'll copy down the information. And if you don't mind, we'll just take a copy of your healthcare card or your birth certificate. Because we've got to have something. That's just how it is.
Yeah, we're in the information age.
I think that this is not going to be a problem that shows up too many times. The law might be one thing, and we're not quite sure exactly what it is, but practically speaking, I think you can get around this and get the information you need.
And so Lewis is just adding in. So he was asked in chat there, I think by Barbara about, where did this come up? And he was taking a course, and he's told him when he first became a landlord. But yeah, I don't know. It's such good practice to know who you're dealing with. You need some verification beyond word of mouth and what they sign on the paper, because you know what, people aren't generally always honest, and maybe they're just in a tight spot and they figure if they just fluff a bit of information, it will get them through on the application, and you got to have all this information.
My other one-liner for photo ID is, well, if the house burns down, I have to tell the RCMP who lived here.
Yeah. Well,
I just try to make a joke out of it. Not that it's going to burn down, but if it did.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so one of the people we partner with is Landlord Credit Bureau. They're the spin-off of what TVS used to be. And I can build people's credit now. I say, well, hey, you're paying $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month. It's probably your largest payment of all your bills. Why not get credit for it and build up your credit score or maintain your credit score? And I have never seen a person say no to that. And if they don't want it, then, or if they're not willing to do that, to me, that's a red flag. Well, if you don't want to build your credit score, it either tells me you don't have a very good credit score to begin with, or you're hiding something, or you're trying to move in my property and as a professional tenant and then try to get free rent out of me.
Yeah.
So I have to collect all that information. And you know what, if they don't, and I talk about this during my viewing due diligence process, part of the process. So if they don't sign on or provide information, I go, no problem. Have a good day. I wish you the best of luck, and I move on to the next tenant. So, yeah.
All right.
Okay. So sorry, kind of halfway involved there. We kind of jumped around there. You're talking about the different strategies, rent to own, how they package them together. I know, Andrew, you're answering those questions, but Andrew, you're actually part of Barry's expert panel. Are you not?
I am.
Yeah, excellent.
So the other thing, Mackenzie, that I think it's important for people to hear is that most people start out as long-term buy and hold investors. Mm-hmm. Don and I have properties like that. Andrea has properties like that. You have properties like that. But we think that the creative side of things, the 5 strategies that we talked about, are a nice supplement to a buy and hold strategy. I mean, you can do nothing but creative if you want, but it's a nice supplement to buy and hold, especially if you're kind of running out of money. So if you can't qualify for mortgages anymore, but you still want to acquire properties, then if you can implement a seller financing technique like agreements for sale, that's good. If you can see the market's rising and you can tap into that pool of people who want to buy a home but can't qualify for a mortgage right now, well, rent to own is good. If you're able to find undervalued properties and then find third-party people to buy from you, then that's assignments, and you can make a nice living and a nice profit finding an undervalued property and then selling it for more money, for market value or beyond, to a third party. Fix and flip. Who doesn't love fix and flip? Or who who thinks they don't love fix and flip? Fix and flip is a worldwide phenomenon. Everybody knows what fix and flip is. It can be a great technique, again, if you can find undervalued properties, and that's really the key. And then do the fix-ups that allow you to sell for more money than you put in. So all of these are cash now, and that's why we call our big program the Rapid Cash Program, because it's not long-term buy and hold, building up equity, and paying down mortgages, and you get the payoff 25 years down the road. These are things that, what's that, Mackenzie?
Look how thick that thing is. I read it a long time ago, and then I got busy with life and kids, but there's just chock full packed of good information. So I am in fact a student of your program, Barry.
So Mackenzie, what is that thing that you've got there? Tell people what it is.
It's 2.5 trees of spruce, a bit of birch in there as well, and chock full of information. It's good stuff, actually. You know what the best part when we did the conference was? One, we got to network with really good people. I think actually this is the first time I met Andrea in person. That would have been back in fancy 2018 in Red Deer there. And then we did role playing as well. And, you know, it's one thing to learn a strategy, and it's a completely another element to put it into practice and learning and being comfortable with those conversations. And I learned I was not comfortable with those conversations, and I decided to go on another strategy. And now here I talk about tenants and landlording problems. But hey, no problem. All good information. And I think at some point when I have more free time, when the kids are a little bit bigger, I will be implementing some of these strategies, because it's a fun way to get into real estate if you don't have the resources to do the down payments right now. So why not?
Well, Andrea, let's have a few stories back and forth, because I know when people hear about these creative strategies, they're going, sounds a little complicated. But what a lot of people say is, can you actually make any money doing this? I mean, can you really make some rapid cash? So, you know, give us a couple of stories from your career on, you know, undervalued properties or assignments where, you know, you did a deal, and you can give us some history.
Yeah, so I have been doing a lot of these strategies since 2009. So I have a fair amount of experience at this. One of my favorite strategies is absolutely to buy houses from tired landlords and buying them at least 10% under market value, and then putting in a rent-to-own client who will buy it 2 to 3 years down the road, and creating myself a nice difference in between. And oftentimes it can be $50,000. I didn't have to qualify for a mortgage. Many times I put very little money down. And that's sometimes because people don't have any equity. So once you show them what the market value is and what they would get after realtor fees and mortgage payout penalties and all these things. And, you know, so it's not hard to get people to see the light of why it's in their benefit to sell a property with their financing in place. And then that allows me some time, usually 2, 3, sometimes even 5 years of seller financing to rent that property or to put a rent-to-own client in and make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 over time, because I'm getting the value increase, I'm getting principal pay down. So at the end of the day, it works out to a nice profit structure. So when we look at long-term buy and hold, you're looking at 25 years to pay off a mortgage. When we're looking at rapid cash, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 4 years. That's still kind of rapid, right?
That's fast relative to the long-term buy and hold. And one thing, folks, that we've found over the years is that you cannot predict what sellers are going to do. You take your rational approach to life and go and see a seller, and you will find sellers will give you amazing deals. They give you amazing deals because they're tired and they want out, as Andrea said. They give you amazing deals because you're a decent person and you treat them decently in the process. They're selling, you run into them, everybody else is trying to beat them up, and you're, you know, kind to them, and if there's another way out, you show them that. And so they will deal with you and give you a great deal. That reminds me of one of our students in Calgary who got a property for, it was $150,000 less than market, $150,000. And she tried to tell the seller that they should sell with a realtor and get their money. They should do a joint venture with somebody. They should get some help from family to get them through the financial crisis. They tried everything to get this seller to see that they shouldn't give our client $150,000. And the seller had a good answer to all the reasons why she wasn't going to take any of our students' suggestions. No, she wasn't going to do that. She was selling to our student. And finally, our student says, okay, well, great. And she acquired a property that now turns out to be her own personal residence for 150 grand under. Now, those deals are not on every street corner. They're not. Please don't go away and say, Barry said I'm going to make 150K every
6 figures. Here we go.
Not saying that. But I am saying that there are way more great deals than you would expect. There are lots of decent deals that will fit your model where you can make a decent profit that you'll be happy with all day long in all of those strategies. And our job coming up on July 17th is to go into all of what we're talking about here in more detail. I mean, a whole day to tell you about these strategies and how they work and why they fit together. And so we're only doing it for a half an hour tonight, but we're planning to spend a whole day on July 17th because it takes a while to go into the details.
Yeah, that's just, it really does take that full day. I even remember after that 2.5 day weekend, and I had questions after the fact. So there's a wealth of information you've got there, Barry. So it's yeah, I highly recommend if you guys are thinking about getting this game a little more advanced or want to know more options you have. And like you guys said, focus on my buy and hold strategies, but maybe something comes across my playbook. Hey, this is really under market value. I don't do fix and flips, but if I can at least get it under contract or maybe get interested and move that thing somewhere else. So you may not even do the strategy, but if you're aware of the different options out there, you might be able to execute one. And we got a support group here as well. And I know, Barry, you guys have a very active Facebook group as well. Maybe this is a good time to share it. How can people find your guys' Facebook group?
Well, people could find our Facebook group because Donna will tell me that as I turn over to her. She's cooking supper just to my right here. And I'm going to say, Donna, they can go and find
Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education.
It's Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education Group. So that's a Facebook group. Barry McGuire's Creative Real Estate Education. So that's how you find it. And yeah, we are an active group, Mackenzie. We, like you, like to get our people together and talk about these things. Andrea is a frequent participant. We're always glad to have her. And we at least once a week we get on and flap our lips about all things creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
There it is.
So yeah, let's I guess we're all right at 8 o'clock, man. Time flies when we're talking about fun, exciting things that we like to kind of nerd out on as being investors. But yeah, you know, and I wanted to comment, you cannot predict human nature. I've heard so many of the different stories where people have picked, vastly under market price on. Like you said, they don't happen often. They're the diamond in the rough occasionally, but they are out there, and people will make decisions for reasons you'll never understand.
That's right. That's too true.
Yeah, so, yep. So, all right. One thing that we did negotiate with the Barry, and I'm going to wrap up the show here, is you guys are kind enough. You have an online store with all of your guys' courses. You've got different due diligence. Do you still have all the binders for sale? I have. You do?
Well, they're not binders anymore. You can't get Mackenzie's 2.5-inch rapid cash binder because it's digital. But all of our products, and there's probably about 7 or 8, are still for sale. Look at that. Yeah, what a guy.
Because, I'm so cool. Almost lost it. Joint. Oh, that's a joint venture.
I'm going to have to give you a coupon for being a good customer.
You should. Oh, yeah. Deals done in Alberta. That's a nice one. So I used to put all the CDs. Well, I still do. I just now do with my headset because my wife doesn't want to listen to the car when we drive to the mountains now. But I've heard all the good stuff. But yeah, it's good information. It's just a great way to open up your lens and knowing what's out there. So I highly recommend it. So You guys, I don't know if Barry, you know, but I've been talking to Dawn in the background, and she hooked me up with a pretty cool deal. She's given us 10% off to our Alberta Landlord community to get any of Barry's content. So, folks, it's an exclusive offer. Did you share me the link? If not, I will post the link on the show conversation here within the group for you folks if you want to go and expand your real estate knowledge and take it to the next level, being a real estate investor like Andrea and learning from Barry's knowledge. So,
well, this has been a lot of fun. I think Donna's just going to do a bit of posting right now. We will get the some form of tenant estoppel out to you guys, hopefully in Word format, so you can manipulate it for your own purposes. And just another tool in the tool belt, just to know that if you want to bang on doors and get tenants to tell you the truth, well, if you get tenants to tell you something and sign it, then there'll be a forum for you. So it's been great, Mackenzie. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrea, you're always a wealth of information. I'm lucky to have you on a monthly segment. So thanks for coming on tonight, spending your time and sharing us your knowledge.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect. All right, folks, we'll sign off. That is another show of the only show dedicated to Alberta landlording and a little bit of investing tonight, the Alberta Landlord Shop Talk Show. I'm your host, Mackenzie. We'll see you guys soon. A quick announcement, too. I'm probably going to gear back the shows over the summer here. I need to do a little bit of rest and relaxation and kind of refocus here. But we'll be doing occasional shows throughout the summer, probably bringing in Andrea and some other fine folks to help you guys out with those challenges of being a landlord. Next, on that point, we'll see you guys next time. So thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Barry.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.